Hey, founders, I'm here. Very excited to have this conversation. I'm here with Deema, the a co-founder and CEO. You're the CEO still, right?
Yep.
CEO of BiggerPicture. And the big news is Deema and her team and BiggerPicture got into Y Combinator, just started their new batch. And I know many of our founders at startups.com have either applied, gotten, or some have actually gotten through Y Combinator, but many have applied and are thinking about applying. And I thought this would be a great opportunity because, full disclosure, so I interviewed down at Y Combinator 2015. Is fascinating just having the previous conversation just prior to this recording with Deema talking about her experience and just sort of comparing notes. And Y Combinator has dramatically changed over the years that we've been watching. If you are in the startups community or you claim to be a founder and you don't know what Y Combinator is, then you might want to question your understanding what being a startup founder is. And this is actually a really great test, just an aside. If you have an investor that claims they invest in startups and they don't know what Y Combinator is, who Y Combinator is, then you probably have a really good sign not to take any investment money, or you're just dealing with a very inexperienced or unsophisticated, investor. And so do your due diligence and be cautious. Y Combinator is the biggest game in the world as far as an accelerator is concerned. What they do is 2 times a year, they interview a whole whack ton of founders, and then at really multiple stages. It's really expanded, and they will take founders really like at pre-product, kind of just toying around with idea stage, to really mature companies. They invest $500,000. Back in my time, it was 125 or $127,000, or something like that. So it's really increased because the landscape is competitive, and they are responsible for funding over 3,000 startups. As you see, you just check out these logos, and over 7,000 founders with a combined valuation of $600 billion. So as you can see, the results speak for themselves. And you just look at those, logos right there. I think the most recent real sort of darlings that made a splash, although, the markets are embattled right now, would be Coinbase and DoorDash. And so it gives you an idea of what space or what level, the elite level that Y Combinator operates at. So imagine taking Harvard or Yale, like the top Ivy League school that's impossible to get to, and then take that to the nth degree, like 10x that. And that's what Y Combinator is like. And I don't think I'm really pumping the tires. They're not the only accelerator in town in the game, but they happen to be the biggest, accelerator that's probably created this whole batch model and things like that. Like, if you just follow the history and you understand, you learn where Y Combinator came from. And so that gives you a little bit of idea of Y Combinator. And obviously, most likely, if you're in our community, you've heard of Y Combinator, but I thought this would be a really great idea to have a video that talks about, in general, the experience of Y Combinator and what that's like. It is very difficult to get in a Y Combinator only because the number of founders that apply every single batch, as well as how competitive it is. And Deema will be the first one to tell you her experience. But Deema, you were telling me that you've got companies there that are way down the road, and you're wondering, wow, you're making so much revenue. What do you need Y Combinator for? So we can talk about that. Deema, welcome. Thank you for doing this. How about you introduce yourself and share a bit about your company?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm Deema, the co-founder and CEO of BiggerPicture. We're a supply chain SaaS solution in the enterprise space.
And how long have you been? You were another company. I remember your company had a different name.
It did. So we were originally BiggerPicture, and we rebranded as we started to understand our market space a little bit better.
Yeah.
In the sense that, one transaction and supply chain doesn't just end there. It has a ripple effect on the entire network, from transportation, distribution to retail. So we look at that as the bigger picture. Each little node actually adds up to a much larger network.
Okay, yes. And so wait a second, your company formerly was, what's the name of your company? Okay. And then you changed the bigger picture just because you thought that it represented you a lot better.
Correct.
Okay. So we are talking about Y Combinator. So what made you interested in Y Combinator? So what's the thought process? Obviously, you'd heard about Y Combinator before. What did you know about Y Combinator? What made you decide to apply to Y Combinator?
So I knew about Y Combinator as it relates to, the accelerator, like the accelerator of the Bay Area where I was living at the time, and that it was super competitive. I had a different impression before I had applied of what it was, and had really been under the viewpoint. And I think that they still kind of present that forward, is that it's strictly technology companies, and that I needed to be a technical founder in order to be able to apply or even be considered to the program. So I had shied away from applying for quite a while, but as I was continuing to have conversations with VCs in the stage that we were within the business, I kept hearing, you should apply for YC, apply for YC. I heard it enough times that I decided, all right, I have nothing to lose. So I applied for YC.
Okay. And so Y Combinator, what they do is they've kind of got this cohort model, which they call the batches, and then they open up applications, a few weeks after the most recent batch sort of winds up. Again, it's been a while since I've looked at it or thought about it based on my experience. But then you apply, and then they kind of say, okay, there's a deadline for application. Then everybody sits on pins and needles waiting for a response, and you get invited to an interview, and then you go through the interview, but then they take some more time to make some decisions. And because of the number of founders and startups that apply, this is extended. When I applied, we got an invitation to an interview that night that the applications closed. So
wow. Okay.
they were evaluating. We got a closed application. We got an invitation. Now, I think I got an invitation early. I got actually contacted by Sam Altman, who was the president at the time, I believe. And he contacted me a little earlier, and he started asking me some questions. And so I knew we were on the right track because he asked me to send him our growth graph. And so he was, just doing some more discovery, et cetera. Got invited to the interview. We're in the interview process, probably, I think 6 weeks later. So they sent me a little stipend of money. They PayPal'd me some money, said, get some tickets, come to San Francisco. Went through grueling interview. My interview was 20 minutes. I hear that it's like half the time now. I was there in Mountain View. So I got all the pictures. I got to run around all the startup campuses. 20 minutes of the most intense, grueling interview I've ever had. I say that I think it changed me, not in a good way, just in how intense it was. So that was kind of like my experience. And then that night they sent me an email saying, and again, full disclosure for everybody, they said, we really like it. And they said, we think you're going to, very affirm, we think you're going to make a lot of money. There are some things that we want you to change. And so they gave me some feedback. And then I thought, man, that's a great idea. I was like, wow, this is even worth it. Did the changes. And then I think I sold the company 3 months later. They did come back, and they said, they did contact me back, and they said, hey, what's going on? Like, are you coming, or are you going, or, different things of that nature. So I found it a very pleasant experience. So now let's go all the way back to you, Deema. So application, what was that like? How did you go about filling out the application? Interview, walk me through your experience.
Yeah, so the application process can or cannot take a lot of time depending on where you are, I guess, with your business formation and the way you think about it. You have to do a 1-minute recording introducing yourself and the business. It has to be super quick, straight to the point. 1 minute's not a lot of time.
And what did they tell you, or what did you learn as the reason they do it that way? Because I had to do it as well. I think this is important.
I did not look at the reason. I thought it was just my intro, like, hey, what's up? And they were like, don't overdo it. It's supposed to be with founders, right? Because most of the there's very, very few single founders in YC. It's like a handful, even in our batch, but they want to see the dynamic between the founders and whatnot. So I was on my own at the time. When I had applied, I was a single founder. I had already been pitching. So my business model had already been predefined. So I was able to go through some of these questions without thought. I was able to display what I had already done. We already had a product, so we had to provide a demo recording to our product. And they asked things that are more on the technical side, such as, like, what things have you created or done on your own? Have you built? I had not built anything on my own. Again, I'm not a technical founder. So I went through the process. I probably took a few days to get the application cleaned up and submitted. And at that point, all it shows you is that your application was submitted. Like, it shows you a timeline, like open application submitted, deadline. So I'd keep checking back. You get no communication, period. There's no like update. Hey, applications are closed now, or we'll be getting to you soon, or nothing. So I didn't hear back until probably almost 2 months had gone by. We submitted before March. By we, I mean myself, before March. And then I had gotten a notification in May, and the notification was, you've been invited to an interview tomorrow. There's no notice. You're not allowed to reschedule. You have to select the time and just figure it out. So if you're co-founders, you both have to be available. You both have to be at that interview.
That's great.
So don't just think like you've got time to prepare and like practice your conversation, because you get 10 minutes. That's it. You're on a Zoom call, so you're not going in person. So there is benefit and there is not benefit. I waited on my Zoom call for like 5 minutes before they joined. And that was probably the hardest 5 minutes of my life. I mean, my heart was pounding. I was like, had rehearsed a million times what I wanted to say. There's no point in rehearsing, because they asked questions out of right field. It felt as if they had reviewed my application maybe like 15 minutes before, maybe huddled on it before the call. And it was nothing about the business model or what I had built or about myself. It was really about, where do I see this path forward? And it's a technical software company. Where's your technical co-founder? And a lot about my team. So there was quite a bit of focus there. And it almost felt like it was a contentious conversation. It was an argument. And I was like, I don't understand why you even gave me this interview if you wanted to just argue with me over not being a technical founder.
Absolutely. Okay, so pause for a second. Let's go back, because you bring up a really good point. And, when I coach founders for the interview and I sort of do a mock interview, they they can't believe, like, I'm traumatizing them, but that's literally how the interviews, like, it's very combative. But let's go all the way back to the application itself. I tell founders, apply to Y Combinator, because just doing the application alone is going to push you to really hone your business and understand your business, because they're asking all the things that other VCs are going to ask when they're in discovery. And then they ask a lot of due diligence based questions that you have to be thinking about, like your cap table and, all that stuff. Right. So, what would you recommend, or how would you describe the benefit or the experience of the application itself for other founders in startups.com who are going to be watching this?
I mean, the application itself really makes you think about your business model. How do you plan to scale? What's your revenue model? What's the cost of acquisition? It not like, the cap table is one thing. Who have you issued? A lot of these companies haven't even are set up to receive anything on the cap table yet. So It was more about really thinking about like, what is your key strategy? How do you plan to take this to the next level? Milestones. Who are your customers? Why are they your customers? What have you done to determine that these are the right customer base? It
What do you
asks,
what do you know that your competitors don't
yes,
know? What's the
what
unique
makes you
insight?
different?
Yep.
Exactly. What makes you different from anyone else? Why is this not in existence today? Just a lot of things that would put you on the defense too in an interview if you were being asked these questions where you feel like you have to defend your business up front of like, why me? Why am I different? What am I doing to have, you know, an impact on whatever space you're in? So they're not questions I typically had even thought through to that level on an investor pitch.
Okay, now I'll point out, Deema, you did this as a solo founder. When you apply, every co-founder has to fill in their own profile, and they ask questions because they really want to get to know the founder, and that's the reason they want the video and all that stuff. They ask this question like, what's the most impressive thing that you've done outside of work? And then they asked me, what is one system that you hacked, you know, and all this outside of your technical. They still ask those questions, right?
They still ask those questions.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not technical. I didn't fill it out.
Oh, you didn't fill it out. That's interesting.
I mean, I didn't hack a system or anything. I'm like, I don't know, this doesn't apply to me.
Oh, gotcha.
So
okay.
I didn't fill that part out. I was just like, okay. I mean, it felt like it felt more on the technical side. So
what did you do for the most?
You feel
Yeah. Well, what did you put in for the most impressive thing that you've done outside your startup?
Oh my God. I'd have to go back and look. It wasn't that impressive, clearly. I don't remember. I mean, I did this so many months ago. I should have looked at the questions. I just think I probably based it on like my personal experience outside of industry,
and that's
family and startup world was more my thing, and on the personal level of raising a family, starting a business kind of deal.
And that's what they're looking for. If you hold patents, or won a hot dog eating contest, things like that. Like, they're looking for color, something to get an idea of who you are as a founder. Okay, so you had to wait 2 months. Gosh, that must have been excruciating. All those things. I know founders that just like, can't. I say just forget it. Keep building your business, because the best thing you could do is get to the interview and have already done like new things if it comes up. So you get 2 months later, you get an invitation, quick turnaround. The interview is the next day, and so I tell founders that their job in the interview is to try and shake you as much as possible to see your resolve, your resilience, how relentless, that you are. And I don't know why I share this story, but I'm not going to share who it is, because she's actually a real prominent person inside Y Combinator now. But they had one. So I was in an interview with 3 people. And so tell me, I'm interested in the experience, but like, I would start answering the question and they just cut me off. And they say, well, what about this? And how come you're saying that? And you just said this. And like, they were like accelerating the conversation. It was like a debate. But there was one person, and she pretty much was designated to sit and stare right into my eyes. I was live. She said nothing. She just stared daggers into my eyes. It was so unnerving. I had my technical founder there. Co-founder there. He probably spoke about, let's say 20% of the conversation, just confirming, yep, this is the tech stack, et cetera. Now, I had the advantages of bringing like printouts and, different things, et cetera. So that was my experience. And wow, it was like just getting punched in the face in multiple directions, seeing how you would respond. What was it like for you in a little more detail?
I didn't have that much of a different experience. I had a partner who didn't say a single word the entire interview. So I didn't realize, like, you don't know who's interviewing you when you get the interview, and you get like names on the screen, but you have less than 10 minutes. So it's not like I'm like jotting down the names and trying to like figure out who's who so I can like navigate the conversation. You're really walking into like the unknown. There was a technical interviewee and a more business person. So it was between the two of them kind of ping-ponging back and forth. And it's just straight face. Like there's no emotion from their side of the table. So you can't read the room. There's really no reading like, oh, they like me, they don't like me. It's just matter of fact down to business. And it's partly because they go through so many interviews. I mean, I think there were like 19,000 applicants in this last batch. So from the time the last batch ends, they already start picking up these interviews, and it's exhausting. I can only imagine at that point, they're like, it's like, I'm hearing the same thing over and over. And they're probably asking some of the same questions, but it is, what is it called when they can like basically understand like what to expect in certain stages of companies and founders. It's mapping, basically. So they know, I think that they're like so into it at this point. They know what to ask, when to ask it, who should be asking what questions, because their dynamic was like on point. Like there was no question of who's going to ask the next question or like whose time is it to go. They were in there. They were in rhythm at that point.
They've got it down to a science. And I got to respect that. You know, when I've interviewed at different funds, and it's been very pleasant. You know, they invite you down, you go into a boardroom, they offer you drinks, and it's all pleasant. And then the heat slowly starts to turn up. I'm sure you've experienced this actually, because you've pitched and you've raised previous to this, right? So, you know, it's a lot more pleasant. They want to be your friend. Here, they're trying to get to know as soon as possible, and they've boiled it down to an exact science in 10 minutes, again, which is very unnerving. And I don't want founders to be discouraged. It really does grow you up very quickly. But if you had to compare your experiences with raising money from other sources, how would you compare the two, or what are the ins and outs or the benefits to your experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I've never done it in person, by the way.
Oh, okay.
I started my business in 2020, so it's always been virtual. I'm okay with that. But you can sense like early in a conversation, when it's one-on-one, it's very different. It becomes a more personable conversation, and you can just tell if you're like on this, like connecting with that person or not. Like those conversations can be clear. There's no personability, like how's your day, anything like that. So this is strictly just business. So that part, you know, I think takes a little bit away from the conversation. It's strictly a business call. You've got 10 minutes to do it. The VC side, I think there's a little bit more give and take. Like, what are their experiences that they can draw into? You're telling them a story about your business. This is like, you don't even have the chance to really tell them your story or why you. It's truly the fundamentals of what your business is and are you the right person to be, you know, pursuing it.
Perfect.
Yeah, matter of fact type of conversation.
The lesson for founders who are listening to this is that the Y Combinator interview is completely different. You could have pitched 100 VCs before Y Combinator. It's apples and oranges. So just take that to heart. Now,
I probably did pitch 100 VCs before.
Exactly.
Very
exactly.
different.
Yeah. Now let's talk about some of the things that you did. You were telling me that you got recommendations and everything. So talk about all the other activities you did to prepare and give yourself the best shot to get in a YC. And I'm curious how you learned about these little tricks of the trade, if you will. What was that journey?
So Y Combinator has so much content out there, not just directly from Y Combinator, but a lot of founders. So I spent a lot of time actually reading through people's advice. And one thing that I read was being able to have, you know, some kind of recommendations is beneficial. So one, either you look at a previous class who those same batch partners will be. So there are 4 groups within our batch now, and each group has, I think, 2 or 3 partners. You could probably look for anyone that graduated from previous batches that would have been under these partners. So there's like a high probability that they know each other, or anyone in previous batches period, just to give some type of network effect or like who you are as a person. I mean, I think that their application process, or when they fill it out for you, it's pretty generic. Like, I think this person's pretty cool. They're working on something interesting. I don't think anyone wrote anything like very personable about me that would have like tipped it, but I think that there's just one more thing to say, okay, well, these people we know or we recognize, like she's got a network maybe.
Okay.
I just talked to other people who recommended going to it. So they put recommendations. My VC who had invested in me prior was not a YC alumni, but works and does stuff with their demo day or is like invited prior. So he put a recommendation in. I think there's something to be said about just having like reaffirmation of your network helps.
It's huge. And I think a lot of founders, they realize this after they've done VC before, how easy it is to get other VC if they're obviously on the right track with traction, etc. If you have a track record of working with VC or a previous exit, domain expertise type thing, then it's so much easier. And they obviously account for that. And one of the not so secrets that Y Combinator talks about is they invest in founders. And I've heard stories of founders start with one project and then by demo day, they're in a completely different company and, they get funded like massive amounts of money. So they're interested in founders because it's inside information. A lot of founders don't know this, but VCs pretty much expect the founders to pivot in some major fashion after they've invested. So that's the reason they're really interested in working with the founder and seeing what that's like. So there's your experience now. So when I was down at Y Combinator's office and we're all in this, the big room where you got all the pictures where they got the picnic tables, the orange picnic tables and what have you. And all these little groups are huddled and these people are walking around and everyone's jovial and friendly. I met so many founders that I thought I was so intimidated. I thought they were way cooler than me. Kids from MIT, like doing just some crazy shenanigans, disruptive and, changing the way this works and that works. And we were just there as like a employee engagement SaaS. It was so boring. Like it was just I'm thinking, man, I must be so boring to you guys doing some of these crazy, consumer facing apps and things like that. But, I learned how broad and range, like there were live prototypes. I saw a guy like install a whole garden up a wall at YC for his demo. You had people who were very mature in another country, have already making millions of dollars, et cetera. And then other people were like, I kind of know a lot about this particular field. And so I haven't quite figured out yet. So when you get in, you said you start to meet founders. So they invite you kind of like to this onboarding kind of party or what is it? And then you met all these founders. So walk us through, what was your experience?
Yeah. So one, I'm happy I did not run into these founders prior to my interview because that would have psyched me out 100%. I mean, like you said, there are some very, very, very impressive people and trying to accomplish some amazing things that I really hope that they're successful. As I mentioned, I have a lot of biotech in my group. So for me, it's like I'm in supply chain. So people will be talking about like amazing things that they're developing and working on these research studies. And I'm like, man, I'm just trying to get the supply chain to work. It's like this thing. But yeah, there's a whole range of companies size where they are within a startup. We had people who just got accepted hours before, days before, they applied later, to people who applied with really no business idea, but because of their background or whatever the impressive interview went, I have no idea, but they're still ideating. Like, I know that there's something here, we want to explore it, we're going to do a couple things and just quickly test these concepts. So it's been interesting to hear. And then you've got companies who are abroad who are taking examples of businesses or products that have done really well here and going to launch those types of models abroad as well. So it's a very, very wide range, super wide, and very impressive. Like, I feel like I was like, man, do I belong here? I'm telling you, if I went through that interview phase, seeing all of these people, I would have questioned that. But I just think it's like, it's all about do you have the confidence? Do you believe in what you're building, or that you're capable of building something? And are you the right team, to do it?
And what types of activities have you already done? You're not through the program completely. What types of activities have you done, and what benefits have you experienced already?
So we did an onsite in person in like a kickoff meeting, and that was really just good to get to know the founders. I think it just creates less of a barrier to having conversations and learning, what are different founders doing, what's their path, lessons learned. And then we've actually done a lot of introductions to founders that have been through YC and are at very different stages of their business, and all the things that they've gone through, good or bad. And it's like raw, like businesses could look amazing on the outside, but just what took them to get there is, I think, refreshing to hear as a founder, because, one day you're up, next day you're down. It's an emotional roller coaster of things happening every day. So that has been super helpful. Not from just a morale perspective, but even learning from their mistakes, hearing like what they did and then their recommendations of what they would have done differently, how they should approach things, how you should think about hiring, at what stage do you do what. So that is just beneficial just to hear, like, companies have been through all stages. I've talked to companies in the past pre Y Combinator, and it's just like, well, I don't think you get where I'm coming from, or my stage, or, like my business model. And there's just so many companies in this network that you figure it out. Like, there's synergies and learnings across different segments, different products. So just having the founder community is really strong. And then there's this, like, you really feel like you're like in this really short period of time that they have you set these goals and expectations, that it's not that they're like you're not hitting your goals or you're not doing this. It's about the pressure you put on yourself to quickly take action, and faster than you would typically do if you didn't have this timeline of demo day, right? Like, you set this goal at the beginning of this thing, and either you pivot or you change or whatever. And it's not a lot of time. It's less than 3 months to set a goal and achieve it in a pressure cooker. So it's good, it's bad, it's intense.
Oh, it's massively intense. So to explain for everybody else, what happens is you have 3 months to prep for demo day. And to get there, they're going to really help you refine that messaging, but also go out and get some traction. Or if you already have traction, really increase that traction and get to as close to product market fit as you possibly can. And then you give your demos in front. And back when I had applied, my understanding, like, demo day was just one day. It was all in one room. You stood on a stage. I think everybody had like 5 minutes, or something like that to do. But now I think it's even shorter. I think it's like 90 seconds, and they have to split demo day across multiple days because it's really frothy, and that is one of the benefits I've heard from other founders who've gone through it, is Y Combinator really establishes the rules and terms, like rules of engagement. So you get handshake deals done, like when, and they've got apps and everything. So when you get a handshake deal at a demo day, it's a done deal. Like, you don't have to mess around with it. They provide you with legal and, all the templates and everything that you need, which is fantastic. So it's full support. But then sometimes maybe Y Combinator is not right. So how much did you think about maybe Y Combinator is not right for me? What went through your head that way?
Oh, I felt it wasn't right for me because I just, like, from a founder fit and the technical side, I was worried that it was so focused on the technical component. While there's a lot of companies in our batch that are not like leading with technology, more like services, et cetera.
Yeah.
I think, they only know so much about your business, right? They get what's on this form, and there's not a huge amount of like digging into like the depth of your business throughout the process. It's more like guidance and questions of like, this is how, you should be thinking about this. This is what's going to get you to that next milestone, the next raise. So there's some times where you got to take the advice with a grain of salt. You need to understand your own business and your own dynamics, because nobody really understands everyone's business. I mean, they've got 250 companies in their batch that they are trying to advise, and such a short period of time, that the depth of knowledge they have in each one of these is really on the surface. So taking that advice and learning from it and figuring it out, how it applies to you, I think is really important throughout the process.
And how did you get over or convince them, or how did you navigate the whole I'm not a technical founder part?
I coerced my part-time technical founder or technical CTO to join full-time. I had actually been working with a friend who came on as part-time CTO and was having a tough time walking away from his current job at the time because it was a cushy job and he was comfortable and he was working from home. And when they asked me on the call, they said, what would it take to get your CTO on as a technical co-founder? I said, it would take this or, a significant investment to get him over the edge. So I BCC'd him on an email that he didn't even know I had applied to YC, accepting him in the role of technical co-founder. But YC being who YC is, like, he got really excited. He was like, he went through multiple emotions of like, why did you just tell somebody I'm quitting my job, to, okay, this could be interesting. Like, let's maybe do, because basically what happened was you usually will hear back the night of your interview, yes or no. And then I actually got an email instead of a phone call that said, how likely is he to join? And then he said, let's just go through the process and interview. Like, I don't have to make a decision today. So we interviewed, there was a weekend in between. He did okay on the interview, in my opinion, but that was a big driver. He talked to a bunch of companies that came out of YC from his very similar viewpoint. He was like, this is awesome. If we can get into YC, like, that's great. Let's just figure it out. Let's just go for it. And then we got in and I called him and he's like, oh shit, like, I actually have to quit my job now. I mean, they were pretty clear. Like, we need your letter of resignation. We need it to show, like, you have to quit your job. People dropped out of medical school, dropped out of their MBA programs, you name it. Like people just dropped everything and joined YC. So many people in our batch had something else going on and now are like full-time. And that's a big deal for them. They want you 100% committed to the accelerator and 100% committed to the business right after. So,
again, they're investing in founders. For us, they grilled me on, like, I was in Canada and they grilled me on, like, are you going to move? Like, how are you going to move? Like, I remember having to research places to stay and the cost of living was just astronomical down there. And then, when I was in the hotel, when we got the email saying it's a no for now, contingent upon, can you just change these things? And I remember calling my wife and I said, it's a no right now. And before I could explain the good news on, I just got to change some things, my wife said, good. Like, I don't want you to move. Like, I don't want you to do this type thing. I didn't want to do it. It was a major commitment, right? Which really rang my bell for a bit. I don't think I'd talked to my wife about really, like, we'd really talked about it. I was just super excited. I got an interview down at Y Combinator. So I don't think she wanted to dampen my enthusiasm. But another thing a lot of founders don't realize, like, but they give you substantial enough money to quit everything, drop it, and do it, because why else would they give you $500,000, if you're not going to drop everything else and do your startup full time?
Yeah. So they actually just applied this new process where it is the 125 at like a super low valuation, so lower than what we were valued at before. And then they do the 375 on most favorable terms.
Yeah.
So that means once you start YC, you sign your contract, the next money you take in, whatever that valuation is, that valuation applies to the YC's investment of the 375.
Yeah.
The caveat there, and like what other founders had done in the past, is they'll raise money during the batch. Like, they'll take smaller checks and valuations, and then, they can decide if they want to go to demo day and raise the larger amount. It doesn't matter. In this instance, the only drawback is like, we're having conversations with people who want to invest, but like on smaller amounts, and it's not ideal because you don't, like, the whole point of YC and demo day is like, you get this build up and everyone wants to have a part of this business. So there's this competition and this urgency to get invested in. So now it's like, it kind of changes the conversation. Plus the economic climate right now is a hot mess, but they've changed that because, one, they want more out of the opportunity, and they want to give more runway to their founders to actually go out there and build something great and not feel like, oh man, I had 125K, which doesn't get you very far these days, and 3 months to really go out and do something with my business. And I think that make or break was just too tight.
Yeah, especially if they want to start attracting founders. It was fine way back in the day when, like Twitch had applied as my social cam, and Airbnb was just kind of like, oh my gosh, this seems like a really dumb idea, but we like the founders and all that stuff. They're trying to attract a wider swath of startups and access those founders that probably are a lot more mature and need more to convince them to go all in with that. The benefit is, I met a YC company in China, and like they got their funding done, all the funding they needed 30 days after demo day. So instead of this long drawn out process, and obviously that's going to be a lure for you, because how long, man, I can't remember. It was, I looked at your pitch deck, gosh, like last November, like you'd already been raising. How long you been raising for?
Oh my God. I never really raised in the end. I did 500 from my initial VC at an early stage, like inception of idea and some friends and family. And then I was trying to raise a round and I just couldn't get that lead investor. We got a lot of like maybes of smaller checks. When you get that lead, let's do this thing. And then I was in conversations with a few VCs as I had applied to YC, not thinking I would get in. And one of the VCs was like, we're going to put some money in. And I said, well, here's the deal. Just got into YC. We're going to have to wait because of this MFN term. And it turned out like it did not go into effect for like another week. So we actually raised a little bit of funding from a VC and a couple angels who wanted to invest prior, which gave us a little bit more runway, because really the sentiment today is like nobody knows what the investment climate is really going to be like.
Yeah.
Even in September, it's changing so quickly. So we took some cash in, but as soon as we announced our YC partnership, or what you want to call it, being in the accelerator, we've gotten tons of inbound from the VC world.
Oh yeah. I took advantage of it too. As soon as I saw your announcement, I dangled that carrot, hey, in front of, some of the funding sources that we send deal flow to. So you're in the show. Okay. Congratulations. It's huge, especially non-technical, solo, female founder, all these things we're celebrating. How does it feel? Like, I'm sure people are talking to you, etc. How you feeling these days?
I mean, one, it feels good because I feel like it gave me some validation in what I was working on. Yeah. I think that I'm a female founder, and from the VC perspective, we're harder to invest in. I don't know why. We're great. So I think that this was kind of proof, not just to me, but like even putting it out there to the community I've already talked to, that, we have been working on something great, and YC has taken note of it. So, I think we're on to something. I'm excited because I actually feel like it has given me the opportunity to really think harder about our business. And we have done a pivot since we've joined YC, and I'm excited to get back out there and kind of talk about where we're heading as a business as it gets to demo day. It's just a little bit nerve wracking.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really a lot of pressure. It's insanely busy right now. We did a 60-second like intro to the YC batch. Everybody did it. I mean, it was only like half of the batch or quarter of the batch in our group. And it's so hard to imagine what VCs are going to go through during demo day, because it's a lot. I mean, to hear all these companies give you 1-minute pitches or 90-second pitches, it's not enough to stand out. I think we're one of the few supply chain companies, so that's nice from that perspective, but it will be very hard to capture the attention of the right VCs in that environment. So even prepping and getting in touch with, venture capitalists that are interesting ahead of time is definitely part of like this program.
Yeah, let me encourage you, never underestimate FOMO when it comes to investors, right? And so just because it's a Y Combinator company and they kind of create this environment of scarcity, and they whip up the FOMO, like they froth it up, like major foam on this cappuccino here, pre-vetted by, YC, etc. Again, it's kind of like they're your lead investor. They're just a stamp of approval, which is fantastic. Okay, so now I'm deathly curious. Here I am, startups.com. We're the on-demand accelerator for the 99% of companies that don't get in a Y Combinator. Okay, how do you see? Because I'll just be very transparent with you. I tell my founders, when I'm helping them and they get in a YC, I say, if you get in a YC, you're not going to need me. Like, I'm just going to read about you in TechCrunch, and I'm going to wish you on your way. Don't forget about us, little people, come back and maybe be an investor or an advisor later on. But, I've had some really great interactions with founders. They're like, no, Ed, I want to stay friends with you, etc. But how do you see, now that you experienced a little bit, and you've been around startups.com for a while, how do you see our two communities interacting? How could we support you from a startups.com perspective as you go through this?
Yeah, I mean, I look at like what YC does in terms of their community, their network. So if they provide this main dashboard, whatever you want to call it, where you can access all these different companies within the YC network that either are in your space, could be your potential customers, could do all these things, right? So I think that there's so much value in the network that you've already built at Founders. And I think making it super accessible, where you feel like you can, it's like, it's a different world. I've never experienced anything like this. Like, people are like, YC or YC, okay, we're like part of this thing. And it's like, I don't know. I think there's a lot of value in us being able to search that, understand, like learn from each other. And that network is like key. You guys have done a good job of that. I had an opportunity to meet with a bunch of founders in my space when I joined, and like being able to talk, I still talk to them about the space, some of the things they're going through. I think that's amazing. I mean, network is everything, I think, in the startup world. Know who you know, get intros to the people you don't know. The asks are important. I think that's, just get stronger with the network.
How I see it is, it's kind of like we're the minor leagues that you grow up in and you practice. And then when you get called up to the show, it's bittersweet. Like, we celebrate, but we also know there's no way we compete with the network in, some people might argue, I think we're pretty cool, but we're not going to compete with Y Combinator, but we're always going to be family. And I tell founders, go there, enjoy the show, and then make sure you come back. Or if it doesn't work out, or you need friends to talk to and people who have known you since growing up and, in your poopy diapers and through your adolescence and puberty and all that stuff, and then you go off and you do your thing, we want to definitely be just that forever accelerator community where Y Combinator is going to end, but hopefully you get friends that are going to continue. But there's just something about having home base, and that's kind of the way, it's the affectionate way that I feel about founders that go on. And we've had founders go on and raise a lot of money and say, we kind of outgrown what you offer. And I say, make sure you come back. And this is the reason I so appreciate you doing this interview, because you're going to inspire a lot of other founders who are at the beginning stage of the journey that you're on. What encouragement would you have for those in startups.com and founder groups that are going to be watching this?
Don't give up.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I was like, all right, we're done. And it just kept like figuring out how to keep going and going. And then, the Y Combinator piece came through. Lean into the people that are in this group, because I think there's so much to be said about being able to share like your experiences and build off of that, because you feel like you're alone when you run a business and it's a startup, and there's just so many things you carry. Being able to have people that you can, talk through what you're going through, what they're going through, feel like you're not on an island by yourself. It really does make a difference, I think, to figure out your next move, get recommendations or thoughts, or just have a thought partner in the startup world.
Let me make my request to you now that you come back, that I can twist your rubber arm to come back and have a follow-up conversation. I think you just have to focus at this point in time.
Yeah.
We're
yeah.
always going to be there for support. And, if you reach the breaking point and you have nobody else to talk to, but I'm going to presume that you got lots of people to talk to Y Combinator. But after you're done the program, we're going to watch you on demo day. I'm going to, be scanning the pages of TechCrunch
Oh gosh.
and all that stuff. No pressure at all. But then after all said and done, let it settle, come back and let us know how it went. And I look forward to celebrating your success. I can personally say right from the get-go, when I looked at your initial pitch deck, I was like, they're on to something clearly. And I know you're changing and shifting, but the traction you already have and all those things. So I have no doubt that this is going to come out with, positive outcome. So I look forward to doing that follow-up conversation with you.
Sounds good. I look forward to it.
Okay. Thanks so much. Appreciate this again.
Thank you.